Just before we get into today's video, we want to bring you a word from our sponsor, Hunt-A-Killer. Easily, my favorite time of the year is around Halloween. I love the weather, the way the trees change colors, and I love the spookiness of Halloween. This year, I got special plans for several friends for around this time of year. I'm going to rent a cabin in the woods, and we're going to spend the weekend playing Hunt-A-Killer. Hunt-A-Killer is an amazing game that's closer to an escape room than a board game. Every month you get a box. It contains puzzles to solve, codes to decipher, and other evidence to investigate. But you don't have to wait for a box every month. You can buy whole seasons of Hunt-A-Killer. Subscriptions and whole seasons of Hunt-A-Killer make for great gifts for game and puzzle lovers in your life. Also, you don't have to rent a cabin in the woods to get into Hunt-A-Killer. The props are amazing, and clearly the design team took some time thinking about them and designing them. It also makes for a perfect, safe, inexpensive night in. One thing I really like is that part of the proceeds from every box goes to the Cold Case Foundation, an organization that is dedicated to helping with real-life cold cases. The president of the foundation is pioneering criminal profiler and the author of Mindhunter, John E. Douglas. Check out Hunt-A-Killer yourself by going to huntakiller.com/criminallisted. Use the promo code criminallisted to get $10 off your first box. Once again, please make sure you use the promo code Criminally Listed. Get Hunt-A-Killer today so you have something fun to do and you'll be supporting Criminally Listed. Do you have what it takes to hunt a killer? Number 3. Gerald Thomas. In the autumn of 1991, 56-year-old Gerald Thomas was living alone in Salt Lake City, Utah. In late October, he met 26-year-old Jerry Lee Robertson and his 20-year-old wife, Cassie Robertson, of the Salvation Army. The married couple was homeless. Thomas invited them to come stay with him. On November 8, 1991, Thomas's ex-girlfriend came over to his apartment. She let herself in and noticed that the apartment was dark. As she was walking, she tripped over something. It turned out to be Gerald Thomas's dead body wrapped in bed sheets. So she called the police. Close to the body was a bloody claw-tooth hammer. The medical examiner determined that the 56-year-old man had been beaten to death days earlier with the hammer. He had been struck 12 to 14 times. One of the blows exposed his brain. The police learned that the Robertsons had been staying with him and they wanted to talk to them. The couple was nowhere to be found. A few weeks later, on December 3, 1991, Jerry Lee and Cassie were arrested in Fresno, California while driving a stolen car. Once they were in custody, they admitted that they beat Gerald Thomas to death with a hammer while he slept. The murder was the result of a fight they had over a board game. That board game is a game that has led to many fights and has probably ended too many friendships. It was the Milton Bradley classic, Monopoly. After beating Thomas to death, the Robertsons stole his money, his real money, not his Monopoly money. It was about $600. Cassie was going to testify against her husband. She admitted she hit Thomas first with a hammer and then Jerry Lee took over. In exchange for her testimony, she would plead guilty to criminal homicide and she'd be sentenced to 5 years to life in prison. Jerry Lee was found incompetent to stand trial. Since Cassie wouldn't be testifying at the trial, she asked for leniency since she only struck Thomas once and she said she didn't hit him hard enough to kill him. The judge was unsympathetic to her plea and in September 1992, he sentenced her 5 years to life. In early 1994, 21 months after Jerry Lee was arrested, a judge determined that he had been faking his mental illness. So he was ordered to go to trial for the murder of Gerald Thomas. In June 1994, he was found guilty of first-degree felony murder amongst other charges like theft. He was given 2 consecutive sentences of 1 to 15 years in prison plus 5 years to life in prison. In July 2017, Jerry Lee Robertson applied for parole and he was denied. He applied again in October 2018 after serving about 24 years in prison. It's unclear what the results of the hearing were, but according to the Utah Department of Corrections, Jerry Lee Robertson is currently out on parole. His current whereabouts are unknown. Cassie Robertson was first paroled in December 2002 after serving about 10 years in prison. But according to the Utah Department of Corrections, she is currently incarcerated. The website did not say why she is in prison, but she is incarcerated at the Utah State Prison in Draper, Utah. Her next parole hearing is in November 2022. Number 2. Tamara Lee Mason. Alberta is a tiny city in western Minnesota. In 2010, it was home to 103 people. One of those residents was 49-year-old Tamara Lee Mason. She lived there with her 3 sons, 25-year-old Dylan Clemens, 18-year-old Andrew Cobb, and 17-year-old Jacob Cobb. On December 27, 2010, Dylan went to the police and said that he and his brothers got into a fight with their mother. He said that she then gathered up her things and left the house. They had not seen or heard from her since. Nothing was really done about the case until May 2010, and then 2 people got in contact with the police. One person said that Dylan had told them that his younger brother, Jacob, had killed their mother. Another person said that Dylan had asked them how to dispose of a dead body. A couple months went by, then in early July, the police searched the family's property. Buried under a shed, they found the remains of 49-year-old Tamara Lee Mason. When the remains were found, Dylan was already in custody for an unrelated crime. He explained what happened on Christmas night. He said that there was an argument, and then he and his brothers talked about how they couldn't deal with their mother anymore. Dylan said that he heard a scuffle, and then he went into the living room. He found his youngest brother, 17-year-old Jacob, strangling their mother. Their mother was face down on the floor, and Jacob had her in a stranglehold. Andrew then got a plastic bag, put it over his mother's head, and then wrapped a belt around her neck. After their mother was dead, Dylan said that he and Jacob put her body in the car. They were going to dump it in South Dakota, but then they changed their minds and they returned home. They placed her body in a garbage can in the basement. The next day, Dylan put the garbage can with the body into the trunk of the car. He then went to visit a friend who lived in a rural area. The friend had an outdoor furnace. Dylan told his friend that he had an animal carcass and he wanted to burn it in the furnace. But then he decided not to dispose of his mother in this manner. So Dylan returned home and kept his mother's body in the shed. In the spring, when the ground had thawed, Dylan started digging a hole in the backyard. He spent 3 days digging, and eventually the hole was 6 feet deep. He then buried his mother and placed the shed over the grave. After the body was recovered, Jacob was charged with second-degree intentional murder. Andrew and Dylan were charged with being an accessory after the fact to murder. All 3 brothers ended up pleading guilty in September 2012. Jacob was sentenced to 15 years in prison, Dylan was sentenced to nearly 8 years, and Andrew received a sentence of 22.5 months in jail. Andrew was released shortly after the sentencing hearing due to time served. It's unclear when Dylan was released, but if he served his entire sentence, he would have been released in 2019. Jacob Cobb was paroled in July 2021. So what exactly was the fight about that led to Tamara's murder? Turned out, she wanted to play the dice game, Yahtzee, with her sons after Christmas dinner, and they didn't want to play. So they argued and ended up murdering her. Number 1. Tom O'Gorman. Saverio Bellante was born in Palermo, Sicily, Italy. In the early 2000s, he was diagnosed with a mental illness called religious hysterical delirium. Bellante believed that he was Jesus Christ. As a result, he was put on medication. In 2011, Bellante moved to Dublin, Ireland. He continued to get help with his mental illness by visiting a clinic every 2 months. He worked for the pharmaceutical company Allergan. In early 2014, Bellante was living in an apartment that was owned by 39-year-old Tom O'Gorman. O'Gorman was a journalist and a researcher for the Iona Institute, which is a Roman Catholic advocacy group. The two men were friends. Early on the morning of January 12, 2014, 36-year-old Bellante called the emergency line. He told them that O'Gorman was dead. He said that he didn't follow the rules. The Gardaí arrived and they found 39-year-old Tom O'Gorman dead in the living room. He had a horrific head injury. He had been stabbed several times and there was a gaping hole in his chest. Bellante was arrested and interviewed by the Gardaí. He said that he and O'Gorman had been playing chess. Bellante said that he moved his king and O'Gorman told him he couldn't do that. He called the move stupid and perverse. Bellante said that the move was legal and O'Gorman was just angry because he was losing. Bellante ended up calling a mutual friend to see if he could settle the dispute. But his friend didn't answer the phone. Bellante said that he began to believe that O'Gorman was the devil and he was Jesus. He went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife from a knife block. He then went back into the living room and stabbed O'Gorman several times. He then picked up a dumbbell and struck him several times in the head. Bellante then cut a hole in his chest and removed part of his right lung. He then took out the heart with both of his hands. He admitted that he ate some of the heart. Saverio Bellante went to trial in July 2015. His defense was that he was not guilty by reason of insanity. Doctors in Italy said that Bellante was to be on medication for the rest of his life. But then his doctor in Dublin started weaning him off his anti-psychotic medication, and a couple days before the murder, he had stopped taking the drug altogether. He was on his second medication, which was a mood stabilizer. Blood tests were done after the murder. It turned out that the drug levels in his blood were lower than the recommended dosage. The jury deliberated for 96 minutes. They found Saverio Bellante not guilty by reason of insanity. He was subsequently committed to a psychiatric hospital. Hopefully none of his co-patients played chess with him. Thank you so much for watching today's video. And now, here's a trailer for our new channel, Paranormally Listed. Do you ever hear strange noises in the night? Have you ever seen something move in a mass of trees out of the corner of your eye? Or have you ever seen lights in the sky that you can't explain? Have you ever thought it was a ghost, or a cryptid, or something otherworldly? Sure, there may be logical explanations, but sometimes things happen that we simply can't explain. We'll examine these stories on our brand new channel, Paranormally Listed. If you love stories about hauntings, mysterious creatures, UFOs, and other unexplained phenomenon, we'd love it if you subscribed. Paranormally Listed goes live on Halloween night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You can find a link to the new channel in the description box below. Also, don't forget to check out our podcast, Into the Killing. In our latest episode, we talk about a brutal serial killer you may have never heard of, Edward Surratt. He killed over a dozen people in less than a year. You can find Into the Killing on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and anywhere you find great podcasts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.